In this video, I'll show you October 9th, 2023 First Amendment Auditor William Taylor went to West Carrollton High School in West Carrollton, Ohio, in an attempt to conduct an audit by filming inside. The interaction that followed was filmed by Mr. Taylor.
Oh yeah, I'm here to be a visitor.
Okay, come on in.
All visitors west side.
Are you meeting with someone?
No, I'm just here to do some public reporting.
But what are you going to be doing?
I'm here recording all publicly accessible areas.
Okay, so you're not with a company that has you assigned to do this or anything?
I don't wish to disclose who I'm for.
Hi,
How's it going, sir?
nice to meet you. I'm the principal. Can I help you?
Yeah, I'd like to do some recording of your building if possible.
No, that's not possible.
Just the publicly accessible areas. I don't have any intentions of filming
We
any
don't have any
children.
public accessible areas.
Any general member of the public is able to obtain a visitor's pass here?
No,
No? Why
not
not?
even close. Do you have a student here?
I don't answer questions.
Okay. You come with me? You can film me.
I don't want to step outside yet. I'd like to continue to do my filming.
Would you like this gentleman to leave?
Yes, please.
You've been asked to leave.
Right now, I feel like my rights are being kind of infringed upon.
And if you'd like to step outside, we can have this conversation outside. I will call a supervisor. We'll do everything you want when we're outside.
I don't think that this is voluntary.
Okay, that's fine. Step outside.
So I'm being against my will removed from the school. I don't think that I'm unwilling to comply. I just think that I want to make sure you guys are going about it the right way, the constitutionally protected way. There have been rulings on higher circuit Supreme Courts that support what I'm doing, and this is a public school. I looked it up before I came. It's owned by the Ohio Board of Education, paid for by Ohio taxpayer dollars. I'm a general member of the public. It's normal hours of operation. So as a visitor, I'm not understanding why I'm being treated any differently than any general member of the public. I think he's more than able to elaborate on that.
No.
You're not going to?
No.
Mr. Taylor claims that there have been rulings on, quote, UN, quote, higher circuit Supreme Courts that support his right to film, and that he is simply asking to gain entry to the so-called publicly accessible areas of the school, like any general member of the public. As we will discuss in further detail later in this episode, members of the general public do not have the right to access any part of the grounds of a public school, and school officials generally have the discretion to control third-party entry to the building. As to Mr. Taylor's assertion regarding the right to film, he later refers to the 2011 First Circuit case of Glick v. Conniff and the 2012 Seventh Circuit case of ACLU v. Alvarez as supporting his arguments. First, it is essential to note that these cases are not legally binding on courts in Ohio, which is in the Sixth Circuit, and as of the date of writing this episode, the Sixth Circuit has yet to rule on whether the First Amendment protects the right to record. Additionally, while these cases do acknowledge a First Amendment right to film government officials in public space, they do not create a right to access and film any government-owned property without regard to whether that poor property is held open to the public. In fact, the Glick case explicitly stated that, now quoting to be sure, the right to film is not without limitations. It may be subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. Likewise, although the Supreme Court has determined that the collection of information, such as through filming, is an important aspect of the First Amendment, the ability to gather information is not an absolute right. And as the Supreme Court explained in the 1972 case of Brandsburg v. Hayes, quote, it has generally been held that the First Amendment does not guarantee the press a constitutional right of special access to information not available to the public generally. Similarly, in the 1978 case of Hutchins v. KQED Inc., the Supreme Court held that the First Amendment did not provide a right of access to the media to interview certain prisoners that went beyond the general public right of access to a county jail. Because, now quoting, neither the First Amendment nor the 14th Amendment mandates a right of access to government information or sources of information within the government's control. Contrary to Mr. Taylor's assertions, a general member of the public does not have a right to access the school, and a court would almost certainly conclude, based on the applicable precedent, that any protections the First Amendment offers to the act of filming do not create a right to film inside a public school building that is not held open to the public.
My supervisor's on.
But why was I asked to come outside?
Because I'm not sure what your intentions are inside the school.
I have no nefarious or ill intentions.
I don't
It's
know
a
that.
constitutionally protected activity, what I'm doing.
I understand what you're saying.
So you
I do
think
understand
I'm,
what you're saying.
you think I'm not acting as what I'm saying?
I'm saying is you asked for a supervisor. My supervisor's on the way.
How long is it gonna be?
I don't know.
She said he's pulling up right now. Can I get your badge number? You gonna give me that?
Yeah. I'll give you my badge number, my name, on a business card, the whole bit.
How's it going? Are you her supervising officer?
Okay, what are we doing on the school grounds?
It's public property.
Not for you, it's not.
Oh yes, it is. It's public property. It definitely is. So are you?
He was recording inside.
I just like to
Was in there?
record the publicly accessible areas. I don't think you guys have the authority to tell me to leave. If you don't have reasonable, articulable suspicion that I'm about to commit a crime or already have committed a crime, you can't ask me to leave public property.
Mr. Taylor argues that because the school is a public building, he can't be asked to leave unless he is suspected of breaking the law, implying that he has a legal right to be on government property. However, it is nearly unquestionable that a court would disagree. According to the West Carrollton High School Student Handbook, quote, all visitors and guests must be approved by the main office upon their arrival. This policy is in line with Section 3313.20 of the Ohio Revised Code, which states that, quote, the Board of Education of a school, district or the governing board of an educational service center shall make any rules that are necessary for its government and the government of its employees, pupils of its schools, and all other persons entering upon its school grounds or premises. Citing this statute, the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Ohio concluded in the 2011 case of Quick v. Dillon that, quote, the Ohio Revised Code specifically grants local boards of education the authority to manage the issue of entrance on school grounds of persons other than students and school employees. And now quoting again, school officials reasonably control access of non-students and non-personnel to school grounds. As we have discussed many times here on ATA, government ownership of property does not necessarily grant unfettered access to that property to all citizens at all times. And while certain government properties may be held open to the public, the government entity that operates on the property generally has the authority to impose restrictions on public access. For example, in the 1966 case of Adderley v. Florida, the Supreme Court sustained trespassing convictions against protesters who refused to leave the grounds of a county jail after they were ordered to relocate their protest. In determining that the convictions did not violate the First Amendment, the court maintained that, quote, the state, no less than a private owner of property, has power to preserve the property under its control for the use to which it is lawfully dedicated. And that now quoting again, the United States Constitution does not forbid a state to control the use of its own property for its own lawful, non-discriminatory purpose. Similarly, courts have repeatedly held that citizens do not have a right to enter or remain on public school property. And as the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Tennessee, which, like Ohio, is in the Sixth Circuit, explained in the 2014 case of Thrill v. McNairy County Board of Education. Quote, school officials have the authority to control students and school personnel on school property. And now, quoting again, members of the public have no constitutional right of access to public schools. Likewise, in the 2012 case of Ritchie v. Coldwater Community Schools, the same court determined that, quote, school officials have broad discretion to limit parent and third-party access to school property in order to ensure student safety and prevent disruptions in the educational process, and that now quoting again, citizens do not have an unfettered right of access to school property simply because it is public. The court also noted that, quote, to this court's knowledge, every court that has considered the issue has concluded that citizens, including parents, do not have a liberty or property interest in accessing school property, and even cited the Quick case we discussed earlier, in which a federal district court in Ohio. held that a parent's liberty interest in directing the education of his children did not extend to a now quoting constitutional right to unlimited admittance into or onto the building grounds of his children's school. Accordingly, it is highly likely the court would find that Mr. Taylor, who was not even the parent of a child at the school, did not have a constitutional right to be on school grounds simply because the property was public, and that he could be asked to leave at the school official's discretion, even if he had not violated any laws.
You're confusing places you're allowed to be with where you're not allowed to be.
No, I'm not.
You're within the school safety zone right now.
I know I'm on school property. This is public property, owned by the Ohio Board of Education, which is a public entity.
What's the end goal here, though? Are you just trying to see how far?
Do you know what a First Amendment audit is?
I'm well aware.
Okay, so it's a perfect stress test for what you guys are doing right now. So are you going to tell me that I'm not allowed in this school? Because if you tell me I'm not allowed in this school, then that's where I start to have a problem. Yeah, go ahead and educate your officers. Am I being detained?
You're not being detained. You're free to leave if you'd like.
No, am I free to go back in the school as a visitor?
No, not right now.
And what happens if I do? Are you going to arrest me?
You've been asked by Mr. White to leave the property.
Arrest me. You can't do that. I'd go ahead and get your supervisor here.
I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to make this into something bigger than it needs to be.
I already have something bigger than what it needs to be at a different department. I would suggest you look into what I'm already on the news, man. This is what I do.
Would you like to identify yourself?
Nope, I'm not going to answer any of your questions. What I'd love right now is an unlawful criminal trespass. If what they require of me, like a visitor to sign in, is my first and last name, I'll give them that.
You said, what was your first and last name?
I'm not going to give you that. If I don't leave, what are you going to do?
Are you refusing to leave the school property?
I want you to give me...
I'm letting you know that the school, inside the school, right here,
You can't, right here, this is public property. You're going to open up room for
By
litigation.
you continue to stay, you are now criminally trespassing.
No, I'm not.
I've asked you to leave.
No, I'm not. Under Glick versus Cunniffe, the ACLU versus the city of Alvarez.
So just to clarify, you were willing to pursue charges for criminal trespass?
Yes.
Okay.
I need you to leave the
All right.
property.
It's your last chance to leave. You're going to be placed under arrest.
Okay, all right. I'll leave under threat of arrest.
Okay. Now, and actually, I do need to identify you now because you stayed too long. So what is your name and date of birth?
And if I refuse to give you that?
You'll be arrested for failure to identify. Or I can give you a criminal trespass notice and you can leave. But I have to identify you now. You've passed the point of your First Amendment audit.
How so?
Okay. I need your name and date of birth or you'll be placed under arrest.
Sergeant Mr. Taylor that he has criminally trespassed by, now I'm quoting, staying too long after being asked to leave, and that he can either provide his name and date of birth to receive a criminal trespass warning or be arrested for failure to identify under the state criminal trespassing statute, which is codified in Section 2911.21 of the Ohio Revised Code. It is a misdemeanor offense for an individual who is on the land or premises of another to, now I'm quoting, negligently fail or refuse to leave. Upon being notified to do so by the owner or occupant or the agent or servant of either, the statute also explicitly states that, quote, "It is no defense to a charge under this section that the land or premises involved was owned, controlled, or in custody of a public agency." And in the 2017 case of State v. Pop, the 2nd District Court of Appeals of Ohio upheld a criminal trespassing conviction against a parent who refused to leave a public high school after the principal asked him to do so, although individuals may have some time to comply with a request to leave. In the 2004 case of Koss v. Kroger Co., the 10th District Court of Appeals of Ohio concluded that an officer had a reasonable basis to arrest an individual for criminal trespass after he was asked to leave several times and refused. And a court would likely determine that Mr. Taylor's repeated refusal to leave the school premises after it was requested that he do so constituted criminal trespassing. As to Sergeant Flynn's threats to arrest Mr. Taylor for failure to identify, Section 2921.29 of the Ohio Revised Code states that, quote, "No person who is in public place shall refuse to disclose the person's name, address, or date of birth when requested by a law enforcement officer who reasonably suspects either of the following. The person is committing, has committed, or is about to commit a criminal offense." While Sergeant Flynn almost certainly had reasonable suspicion that Mr. Taylor was trespassing for the statute to apply, the individual must be, quote, "in a public place." And in the 2023 case of State v. Blair, the Second District Court of Appeals of Ohio determined that for the purposes of this statute, quote, "A public place is somewhere ordinary citizens are regularly permitted to be." Since the school was not held open to the general public, it is possible that a court would find that Mr. Taylor could not be convicted of failure to disclose personal information because he was not in a so-called public place. However, even if a court concluded that the failure to identify statute did not apply, Sergeant Flynn almost certainly had probable cause to arrest Mr. Taylor for trespassing. As the Supreme Court explained in the 2018 case of District of Columbia v. Westby, quote, "Because probable cause is an objective standard. An arrest is lawful if the officer had probable cause to arrest for any offense, not just the offense cited at the time of arrest or booking. Therefore, it is highly likely that a court would not find a constitutional violation if Sergeant Flynn arrested Mr. Taylor during this encounter, even if he claimed to be doing so for his failure to identify himself."
Okay, under threat of arrest, I'll give you my name and date of birth.
Okay, what is that?
William Taylor. So are we, because I mean, you've already threatened an arrest and I'm still here. I don't know.
I have to read you a criminal trespass notice now. That says if you do come back in the future, you will be arrested immediately.
So where am I trespass from? Just right here? Because I'm getting ready to walk over to the elementary next.
If you'd like to get the superintendent involved, you can be trespassed from all city schools. And you can get yourself arrested for even showing up.
I wish you would arrest me.
So stand right here. You are not free to leave right now. You are detained until I finish this. Okay?
Right now I'm detained.
Correct.
You guys are violating my rights.
I'm going to read this to you. Your actions or behavior resulted in management and the West Carrollton Police Department demanding your immediate departure. Now listen to this carefully.
This is not the first time that Mr. Taylor's so-called First Amendment audits have led to police involvement. On May 16, 2023, Mr. Taylor was charged with criminal trespassing for entering the lobby of Monroe Primary School, an elementary school serving preschool to first-grade students in Monroe, Ohio, on May 10th, after he had previously been warned not to enter the property. After the trespassing charge, Mr. Taylor continued to take pictures and videos from the public sidewalk, sparking local news coverage regarding concerns. Parents Mr. Taylor told a reporter that he would no longer take pictures at Monroe Primary after learning that he was scaring parents and students, and, according to the news story, he seems to have followed through on that promise. As of the date of writing this episode, the trespassing charge against Mr. Taylor is still pending, and on August 21, 2023, he was charged with disorderly conduct for, and I'm quoting, making an unreasonable noise, communicating unwarranted and grossly abusive language. Now, although the complaint does not detail Mr. Taylor's actions, it does state that the alleged offense occurred at 233 South Main Street, which is where the Monroe Police Department is located. Overall, Sergeant Flynn and Officer Flout get an A for maintaining professional and respectful demeanors throughout the encounter, demonstrating a tremendous amount of patience with Mr. Taylor's inaccurate legal arguments and personal attacks, and attempting to educate Mr. Taylor and explain why he did not have the right to film on school property. Although it is possible that Sergeant Flynn was incorrect in his assertion that Mr. Taylor could be arrested for failure to identify. He almost certainly could have been arrested for criminal trespass, which would make any arrest constitutional, and it is clear that Sergeant Flynn was attempting to avoid arresting Mr. Taylor if it was not necessary to do so, while also ensuring that he received a trespass warning. I commend the West Carrollton officers for their professionalism and would encourage other law enforcement officers to learn from their example on how to handle a misinformed First Amendment auditor. Mr. Taylor gets an F for demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of the First Amendment and the constitutional right to access public property, likely committing criminal trespassing by refusing to leave the school when asked to do so, and using demeaning language towards the school officials and police officers who were simply attempting to uphold the law and ensure that the children in the school were safe. And while I respect and share Mr. Taylor's passion for the First Amendment, I strongly encourage him to educate himself on the limitations of the constitutional protections granted to filming before he attempts to conduct further audits. First Amendment audits serve an important purpose and can help hold government officials and police officers accountable for genuine infringements on the rights of citizens. But when auditors who do not know the law attempt to expose UN tyrants who are not violating the Constitution or exceeding their authority in any way, it discredits and disadvantages auditors who have actually taken the time to learn and apply the legal contours of the First Amendment. This encounter demonstrates why it is essential that auditors understand that the fact that the government owns certain property does not mean that any member of the public has the right to access or film that property, and how misinformed auditors can easily find themselves in serious legal trouble for attempting. Thank you very much for watching the video. Subscribe to our channel for the next video.